Hey, we're going to welcome Bob Borson. He's an architect, a designer, a blogger, a podcaster, public speaker, social media maven, maybe an influencer. We could get into that, Bob. A world traveler, barbecue connoisseur. I know you have a few other hobbies in there. A home renovation expert. There's other credentials that we could touch on, but I think most importantly for the show, you're an all-around great person. You're a friend of BD+C and Pro Builder and Pro Remodeler, and you're a super fun guest for the weekly. So welcome, Bob.
Hey, thanks for having me. Uh, it's always hard hearing people kind of rattle off the things you do because, like, I go, I'm just a regular guy. Doesn't everybody do all those things now? Like saying you're a podcaster's like, I breathe air. Like everybody's doing it these days.
Yeah, you've
But
turned
yeah,
into quite a renaissance man here, and I think most people know your name through what kind of started as a hobby, if you could call it that, and certainly turned into sort of a side gig and a whole franchise. But that is the long-running and hugely popular Life of an Architect blog
yeah,
podcast. So, Bob, I'd love, maybe we could jump into the kind of the origin of Life of an Architect, just maybe a couple minutes on the history. What was the impetus for starting this
sure.
website, and maybe get into some of the growth that you've seen.
Yeah, no, happy to. So the I started the website Life of an Architect in 2010, and it was really the direct result of having a conversation with a friend of mine who's an attorney who teaches other attorneys how to use technology to do their jobs better. So it was over Christmas. He and I are having a chat, and he was best man at my wedding. We go way back, and he said a sentence to me. This over the years I've honed it down. I'm pretty sure it was this, but it might not have been exactly this. But it was like, hey, just subscribe to the RSS feed and put it in your Google Reader. And I go, I don't, what's a RSS feed? What's a Google Reader? Which ironically doesn't even exist anymore. And I had this moment where I felt like I'm pretty good at what I do. And I know all the tools that I use well. Like I can do my job well with the tools that are at my disposal. But am I becoming irrelevant because I'm not continuing to learn new things? So I decided I wanted to learn what this technology that he was talking about, and the conversation kind of evolved into uh, like blogging. And so I started Life of an Architect just to learn how to do it, to say that, so I could have a conversation and not be ignorant to the words that people were using. So I started it, and on January 14th, I think was my first post, and it was titled "Who Wants to Be Relevant?" And it was talking about, at my age, I grew up, my first job out of school, I can't hand drafted, but now everything I do is digital. So I'm sitting in my office, and to my left, I've got computers and monitors and software. And to my right, I have drawing table and pencils and triangles. And I'm like this man that has a foot in both of these kind of aspects of the architectural profession, which really were kind of like the old way to do it and the new way to do it.
Mhm.
And so it just kind of kept going on from there, just me talking about, well, what am I doing today? And it turns out there's a lot of people that are curious about what architects actually do during the day. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, and I know you're up to what, 60 podcast episodes and well
Yeah.
over what, 500 blog posts. I don't know what the number stands for the blog post.
Oh no, we're probably at close to 1100 now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you cover a wide range of topics, and it seems from events that we've been at together at AIA and some of these other shows, we co-hosted an event at AIA. I felt like the people
Hmm.
that were coming up and wanting to meet you tended to be, 4, 5, 6 years out of architecture school, maybe some student architects. The
Yeah.
point is, you, through your content and advice, you're helping these young architects kind of find their way into this profession and really open their eyes to what the reality is of the architect profession. I, I, I
Yeah.
I would imagine you're sort of amazed by that. You kind of have a fandom out there, Bob.
Uh, yeah, it's a little disturbing paints the wrong picture. Surprising might be a better way to put it. But, I've been doing it long enough now to where I have people that come up to me that say, I started reading your site when I was in eighth grade. And they're now through high school, through college, and they're like, and I just got licensed. And your website helped me decide that this is, in fact, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And That's a real humbling kind of moment for someone to say that you were not just a role in how they charted out their future, but like you were pivotal. Like if it weren't for you, I might not have done this. And you're thinking, I don't know who you are. And so there's this massive disconnect between like the kind of what they're saying to me and me not knowing who they are, but knowing that I played some role that was of value and important to them. So it's very, it's a happy thing. It's very humbling. And it actually makes me feel like it's the reason why I keep doing it, to be honest.
I'd love to get your thoughts on what topics you've seen sort of resonate. Obviously, they're the younger architects. There are quite a few veteran architects that are commenting on your posts and you're engaging with online. What
Yeah.
sort of sticks with your very large audience?
Well, that's a good question. It kind of it falls into kind of two really kind of giant buckets. And one bucket is like like what does it actually mean to be an architect? Like what do you do? What does that mean? Do you draw? Like, what does your day look like? So just kind of having an understanding what the profession is. Um, the two of the most popular posts I ever wrote, and they probably springboarded my website to kind of an international level, was top 10 reasons to not be an architect and the top 10 reasons to be an architect. And the irony is that you could substitute the word architect for almost any job, like top 10 reasons to be a nurse, top 10 reasons to be a teacher, and the list still works. The list is still viable. But that those two posts like went as viral as anything I've ever done. I think I almost have like 1,000 comments on it. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. But the other kind of bucket is whenever I talk about professional practice in some way, like I have a series of articles on my website. It's called Architectural Graphics 101. And and I'll talk about like this is what a finish legend does. This is how it works, or this is how you number drawings, or this is how to read. Like I just did one on title blocks. I'd say this is how title blocks are. Those are wildly popular. And I think part of it is because there's a group of people that just want to understand how that works because it's a level of education you don't really get in school. Like we never talked title blocks when I was in college. That was for the profession to show you. But then there's the people that are actually practicing architects that just have that curiosity of, well, is his opinion aligned with mine? And does my title block look like his? And so it just becomes kind of this interesting conversation of, I do this and I do that. So,
I'd love to move on to your full-time gig, which is associate principal and senior project designer with Boca Powell. I know they have three offices in throughout Texas, and then I think one in Colorado, Denver area, I believe.
hmm
But just a few weeks ago, you announced that you're going to lead, the firm announced that you're going to lead the launch of a residential design studio. So here's a firm that is traditionally commercial architecture work and design work, launching a res studio. I'd love to get your thoughts on what type of work you're going to sort of seek out, what type of clientele, and why now? Is it because of the pandemic and home building and residential seems to be booming right now?
it's not that calculated, unfortunately. I did residential work for 20 years before I left to go to Boca Powell, which is an amazingly wonderful firm. I couldn't be happier that I'm there. And part of the reason I made that change is honestly, I was just getting bored. I mean, I had a firm with my name on the door. And it's the same kind of reasoning I mentioned about why I started the blog site so long ago is you start to feel like, well, I can do this. I've done this so many times that it's not thrilling anymore. And so I wanted bigger problems to solve. I wanted to work with more people. I wanted to have more design conversations. And I can do that in a firm of 120 more than I can in a firm of 10. Right. And so there was a scale that was very appealing to me. So when I started talking to Boca Pal about going over there, it was very enticing to make that switch. So I came over and they do office building. I mean, they're in a lot of market sectors,
Mhm.
but residential is one of the ones that they're not in. And anyone who does residential work will be the first to point out that it's kind of its own creature, like how you design in it, how you engage with clients, how information gets controlled, how you distribute it, working with contractors. Like residential contractors couldn't be more different than commercial contractors. A lot of times it's a guy who works in his dining room at night and then in the morning he's swinging hammers. It's a lot different than when you're working building a $150 million office building. And so the pandemic that we're in right now, I think has forced a lot of people to kind of evaluate certain aspects of what they're doing, and not from a melancholy or a like things are bad, how do I make things better, but just, when you work in your bedroom like I work now most days, um, my day doesn't start at 8 and end at 6. I mean, I'm just as liable to walk by my desk at 11 o'clock at night and be struck by some thought or inspiration and go to work for a little while. So I started thinking about how much I always really liked residential work. I like the contractors. I like the clients. I like the process. I think there are times when I wish I was a residential contractor because I like being on job sites so much. Um, so I just went to the four owners of the firm and I said, look, I'm really good at doing residential projects and I miss it. And I think it's something that we could offer our clientele, if that's something that they were interested in. And they looked at me for a second and they said, why didn't we do this when you started? Kind of like it seems kind of obvious. They didn't have the skill set before, but when they hired me, now they have someone who can do this work. And I brought people from my last office over with me. So we have the same talent pool that I had at my old office, in my office of 120 people. So this is just another way for me to seek out and carve my own path in the profession and do things that make me happy. And
Mhm.
honestly, doing residential work makes me happy.
Yeah, so we're seeing, the production home building market soar right now. It's certainly one of the
Hmm.
bright spots in the economy. Are you getting a sense at all that the custom home building side of the market is also doing very well or better than even a couple years ago? Or
Yeah.
is it just kind of a different beast that you can't really get your arms around?
I think that the custom residential market is doing really, really well right now, at least from everything I hear and what I see. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got a lot of work. Um, we actually have problems with builders having a hard time getting the materials they need to meet the schedules that they've kind of outlined when they bid the project, 8 months ago. Um, all the architects that I associate myself with that still do residential work, they're all as busy as they've ever been. So things look good. Uh, One of the ways that internally we've always kind of used as a litmus test to how the next year is going to be is how quiet do things get in the holidays? Because when you have custom homes and they're client based, a lot of times those projects really ramp down at the holidays because they just don't want to mess with it right now. They're like, you're going great guns in the summer and the spring and that kind of thing, but when the holidays come around, they're traveling more, they're going on vacations, they're like, I got family coming in. So there's like this mad push to get whatever done you can done before Thanksgiving comes. But then once Thanksgiving comes, everything kind of comes to a crawl until after New Year. So depending on how many calls we kind of get during the last 2 months of the year, that's a really good litmus test for how things are going to go for the next year. Because if people are calling in November and December, they're really going to start calling in January and February.
I wanted to move on to you mentioned material supply chain delays, other sort of pandemic related effects on or impacts on the custom residential and even residential design market in general. We're talking a lot about work from home and how that's going to maybe change residential design for the long term. We're seeing more healthy home
Mm-hmm.
demand. Now there's this new term clean home, which is kind of an extension of healthy home. And
Yep.
then just kind of the general sense of we're spending more time in our homes and we just need them to do more and work
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on what are some of the observations and trends that you're seeing as a residential architect and designer.
Well, that's a great question because there's probably about 4 or 5 things that seem to be what everybody kind of brings up. So part of it is now that we have so many people that are working from home and we have students that are doing distance learning, part of it is everybody needs a space to actually be able to set up shop and work.
Mm.
It used to be that, in your 1970s houses, you would have like a proper office and then there might be a little weird desk in the kitchen that really just became a collection of, all the junk mail and whatever. But now we have situations like even in my own house, I've got 4 people here on any one given day that are all doing what we're doing right now. They're on teleconferencing calls. we're eating up bandwidth. I need it to be quiet so I can focus and not have the people I'm talking to hearing my daughter do her choir practice for class, or my wife, she's having her teleconference call. So there's the creating like these multi-purpose spaces that allow people to set up shop and actually do work, right? As opposed to just expecting somebody to sit at the kitchen table while someone else is sitting at the dining room table because you only have one proper workspace. So now we're seeing like desk and work areas built into more bedrooms than ever before. Sometimes it's just making them a little larger so they can accommodate that furniture. Like you might move the dresser out of that fifth bedroom and move a desk into that space. Some of that's happening. Um, some of the areas that are being brought up are master retreats, bar areas, speakeasies, the kind of away rooms, so that like kitchens have always been a very popular space in the house. It's one of the most focused, most attention. I mean, there's specialists in the industry that do nothing but kitchens. We're getting requests now to actually do what we call them away rooms. But it's almost like a little mini living room that's within the kitchen so that the family can be together more often. Because like right now, I have 4 people in the house and I won't see any of them except for if they come up for air for lunch, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So trying to create these spaces where the family can come together, even though it's for these brief moments. Um, Areas like soundproofing. I mean, like that's a feature that we're starting to look at. We've always kind of insulated walls around bedrooms, but now you can do things like barium impregnated vinyl to try to create like really sound isolated spaces so that when you have bedrooms that are adjacent to one another, which is fairly typical in residential design, um, that one room sound isn't bleeding over into the next room sound so that people can like focus and not have random noises showing up on their calls. Another thing that we're kind of looking into and getting a lot of questions about is things like clean kitchens and pantries. So it used to be giant monster kitchens. Well, now we're kind of doing 2 kitchens, which sounds kind of weird, but we have like the public clean kitchen. And then we have almost like a servery kitchen that's kind of behind it where all your coffee maker sitting on the counter and your toaster and all this kind of stuff. And that's the space that gets messy. And then you have more of the social kitchen that's outside of that space. And I think that has to do because we're cooking more often now. It used to be that, you might grab a muffin in the morning and you go out to lunch, when you're at the office and you come home and there's like one real meal in the house a day. Now, I mean, we're cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner 6, 7 days a week because we can't go out to eat. And when we do, it's not as nice because it's either to go or, you're kind of worried about that guy that's coughing over there or,
Mhm.
the experience is just different. So a lot of people are really kind of self-isolating. Some aren't doing it at all. Some are doing it extreme. Another area that is getting renewed attention is mudrooms, which, I grew up with a mudroom, and we typically try to put some sort of mudroom, which, it's kind of over the years is kind of either evolved or devolved, depending on how you want to look at it, into this kind of interstitial space between like the garage point of entry and the main house, which sometimes it's the kitchen area. Well, they're kind of expanding now so that you can slough off all the dirt that you might be bringing from outside the house in. So things like shoe storage is starting to become more of a consideration. And that's a lot different down here where I live. If you live up north and you have snow and ice and it gets gross, it's not that uncommon that people have mud rooms to take off dirty shoes. But down here, we don't worry about that so much. But now we're getting requests to try to make sure that you can kind of drop everything off before you drag it in the house. So storage in the mudroom is becoming more important. Sometimes they're turning into even larger, like utility rooms slash mudrooms. So there's bathrooms that are back in that area. Sometimes there's showers. So when people come in the house, they can actually clean themselves up before they actually come all the way proper in the house. Um, so it really has to do with, the clients that we talk to, they have very specific concerns. Indoor air quality is an issue. So how we set up the air conditioning, the exchanges that we're putting in, the amount of fresh air, trying to come up with spaces that they can take advantage of the outdoors for 3.5 seasons of the year, as opposed to 2. You know, Down in Texas, we have pre-summer, summer, and post-summer. That's about what we get. Um, so outdoor space is really of a premium here because I can eat outside, almost any month of the year. If I just add a fan, if I add an inline radiant heater, I can be outside the entire year.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people are trying to figure out how can they make space where they can be outside, because it allows them to have friends over and not have them in their house, and allow them to socially distance with one another in a way that doesn't feel, weird. Like if it's designed to accommodate social distancing, it's not as odd as if you have a space and you're forcing people to, like, okay, you got to go in that far corner, and then I'm going to go over by this post, right? Because just the space doesn't allow for it.
Hmm.
So those are some of the main things that people are asking about.
Oh, Bob Borson, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for your expertise and your time, and best of luck with the new residential design studio at Boca Powell. And of course, best
Thanks.
of luck with Life of an Architect.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you having me on the show and letting me chat with you guys for a bit.